Tomodachi Game is one of the best anime of this last season. I started making this video when it was still last season. See, the story has a very interesting relationship with romance and love. It's usually framed in terms of how it can be used to tear apart a friend group, because tearing apart friend groups is what the story is about. But there's a bit of a catch. The story is about developing friendships over time as well, like the developing friendship between Yuichi and Kei. And so there's sort of this interesting thing that happens where the same techniques you would use to make two characters grow closer as friends are the same techniques you would use if you wanted two characters to grow closer and eventually end up together. So technically, even though I think it's unlikely, this story is setting itself up to be a romance. So on the off chance the author does try to go down this romance route, I think it would be fun to predict what the endgame ships would be. Also, I think it would be funny. That's why I'm making this video. The other stuff was just BS. But first, before we get into that, if you don't want to end up tens of millions of yen in debt, then you should like and subscribe with the notifications on, and if you don't want me to push you off of a cliff alongside another beloved supporting cast member, you should check out my Patreon. Without further ado, here are our beautiful contenders, the 5 main characters, and these are the people who they might end up with. I'm gonna ship each person with one other character by the end of this, but I threw in 3 wild cards just to keep you guys on your toes. We are naturally going to start with the obvious answer that everyone already knows. Shibe is going to end up with the MILF maid. Like, that's basically canon at this point. It's one of the few canon couples besides Mishima and his polycule, which is like the only healthy relationship in the entire story. We stan? Yuichi on the surface is a little bit more complicated because unlike Shibe, he has a lot of options. He's the main character, so he interacts with the largest number of people, so there's the largest numbers of possibilities you could conceive of that could potentially work in a hypothetical scenario. There is, however, something that makes this a little bit easier for us, and that is that Yuichi is insane, and I don't think he could form a healthy relationship with anyone who isn't also insane, at least a little bit, and so that's why I'm gonna pair him with Maria. I know that Maria is a villain, but villains get redeemed all of the time, and there's actually some indications, in my opinion, that she might have some hidden depths, might actually want to go against the administrators. Maybe that's why she was super interested in Yuichi, since he claimed he would go against them. And not to mention, she had this kind of interesting conversation with Shiho before the Friendless game, where she started talking like a normal person when none of the other administrators were looking, which is, I don't know, I think that's really interesting. I think there's a lot that's going to be done with Maria. Tenji is going to be a little bit harder because he doesn't have some trick that just whittles down his possibilities. One of the obvious options is his high school friend, whose name I don't remember and don't care to look up. That's a little boring though, so another one that kind of comes to mind is Shiho, because the story started with us thinking he was going to be a yandere for her, so it ending with him genuinely having feelings for her would be a neat little parallel, neat little bookend for this series. But if we're gonna go with a bookend, I think a much more interesting one would be if Tenji turned out to actually be gay. If he does turn out to be gay, then the obvious choice for who we can end up with is Yuichi, but as we talked about, Yuichi doesn't really work with anyone who is sane, and Tenji, for the most part, seems pretty sane. So that's not an option. What are the other options? Well, Kei comes to mind since he really just kind of comes off as a bratty sub, but there's a few problems with that. First is that Kei and Satone makes a little bit more sense, or Kei and the captain. You know, there's not really anything between Kei and Tenji right now, and I guess something could happen, but I don't know, there's just nothing really going for them right now. The second problem is that even if Shinomiya Kei is Shinomiya gay, he's clearly a bratty sub, and Tenji also kind of comes off as a bottom. The third, and I think most damning piece of evidence against them, is that if Tenji was gay, he clearly would be the type of... It's spam. The final, and I think most damning piece of evidence, is that Tenji, obviously, if he was gay, He's the type of person who would end up marrying a woman anyways due to deep-seated self-loathing and then just get slammed by dudes on the side. So I'm gonna put him with his high school friend, and that's my final answer. Next, we get the person everyone loves to hate, Kokorogi. And now, this is gonna be a little bit, out of left field, but I actually ship Kokorogi with a bullet. What I mean by that is, I don't really think there's a way to redeem her while having her end up on the hero's side and being a friend, but she also kind of seems like she's being set up to be redeemed, and so I think the only way to make it work and have it be satisfying is if she dies saving Shiho in the same way that Shiho once saved her, though I guess Shiho lived, but, you know, I think that's a really good way to end Kokorogi's character, and so this is my answer for her. I don't think she's gonna end up with anyone. I think she's gonna get shot and killed. And then that leaves us with one main character and one contender for her heart. I know you guys have seen this guy's face looming ominously over this entire thing for a while now, and you're probably asking yourself some questions like, is he really gonna do this? Is this gonna be another fake out? And you're right, this is another fake out. I also ship Shiho with a bullet, but the bullet is being fired by Shinji, and it's not a bullet, it's his I swear I can explain this and make it make sense. Like, just give me a second. So the first thing to keep in mind is that, similar to Satone and Kei, Shinji is a villain who's kinda likable. So there's a pretty good chance, there's precedent, for him eventually joining the good guys. Another thing to consider is that he really is a big question mark with his motivations. His alleged motivations are that he's just hired to help Kokorogi, but clearly there's more going on there, and that more could be anything, including something that kind of makes him not a terrible person. This next part is something I don't think I've seen someone point out, but Shinji is being set up as Shiho's antagonist specifically. You think he'd be Yuichi's due to their, past together, but most of his interactions have been with Shiho, including the first real conflict with him, the hostage exchange game. He played that with Shiho instead of Yuichi. He's also a character that really pushes Shiho to her limits. Her big strength is her ability to win fights, but Shinji is one of the few characters who could probably beat her in a fight if what people say about him is true. Additionally, her big strength is her inability to strategize like Yuichi does, and Shinji is really, really good at strategizing in the same way that Yuichi is. So in two different ways, he forces her to grow in his conflicts with her. The fact that he's her antagonist really implies that wherever his character is going, it's going to have a lot to do with Shiho. And, if he ends up becoming a good guy, that's probably going to have something to do with Shiho. And, that's kind of a setup that could be turned into romance. Yeah, I'm actually kind of serious about this one. Yeah, it surprised me when I made this video too, but all of these ships actually represent genuine insights or predictions that I have about the story that I just kind of wanted to share, which sucks because it would really, really work to end this video on a joke. Wait, Tenji's was a joke. Damn it!